Alright, it's been a while since I made a video, but it's hot news right now. We are going to talk about, Mr. Genius right here. Captain Mustache. Oh boy, is he flushing his country down the toilet. But there's a reason why Erdogan is, getting cozy with Putin right now. Not a lot of people know, but Erdogan and Putin do not have a really good relationship. What I can best describe to you right now is it's a relationship of just temporary political convenience. Erdogan knows in his heart that because his goals are to basically be emperor forever in Turkey and then bring it to greatness. I think he said he wanted the GDP to get to like 2 or 3 trillion, and he wanted I think like a 400 or 500 billion dollar military budget. So he wants the two things that make you grow on the scale of power, which is the economy and your military prowess. Those are the two units of measurement for power. I guess I'm trying to think of another word right now, but I can't. And he's getting cozy to Putin because he's in the same predicament as Putin. He bought that S-400 on purpose. Yes, the Obama administration denied selling him the Patriot battery, or they didn't deny selling it to him. They wouldn't just give him the technology. Like, they wouldn't just give him all the trade secrets to it so he can just build his own. And Turkey's a country that we've always been worried about, and if they ever flip, we don't want them to have, access to nuclear weapons, because there was a point when Turkey wanted to have like a couple nuclear codes to hold weapons in their country when we used to have them there. And, then he wanted these batteries. We can't afford them, leaving and then having great, top secrets and really advanced technological know-how. So they had no choice but to go to Russia, but he knew he could have waited till the next administration and he would have gotten it. But he didn't, so he wants to get higher up on the ladder with money and power, and he can't do that if he has to rely on the U.S. for defense. And I believe he made that move, and he was stubborn about it. Like, he would not cancel the deal for a whole year and a half, and he purposely received them and made it a public thing so he can get kicked out of NATO, and he can play the victim card and, just say he played his part and they kicked him out or whatever. So I believe this was planned, and the reason why he wanted to get kicked out, not just because he can't be in a defense alliance like NATO if he wants to become an independent regional power, but he also, this is a guy who likes to mend the Constitution and do purges and shit and, give himself more powers every year. And he has no more terms. And here, I'll just go ahead and go down the run list. Putin, they were both metropolitan leaders. In the Soviet Union, Leningrad it was the capital of the Soviet Union, but then it switched to Moscow, and then Istanbul, or basically St. Petersburg, has like the same status as Istanbul, and that's like similar to where Erdogan was. They were both metropolitan leaders in the like 90s, mid 90s, And then they both became prime ministers. They did 2 stints. Putin got appointed prime minister, so he didn't win an election. He made it to the presidency in Russia without getting elected to one office. He had so many appointments from Mayor Sobchak in St. Petersburg, and all the way his career in Moscow, all the way up to the FSB director, first deputy premier, deputy prime minister, and then acting president. Nothing was an elected process, and they both used their allies when their terms were up, because they had both done 2 terms and they weren't sure what to do. And Putin used Medvedev to change the rules so that he can interpret the Constitution as, oh, it doesn't say how many times I can have 2 terms. And Medvedev just immediately appointed him as prime minister. And wherever he went, whether he was the acting president, the prime minister, the elected president, the central powers of the country followed Putin. Same thing with Erdogan. I believe a lot of the powers in Turkey were once in the prime minister's position, and Erdogan originally was the prime minister, and when he went over to president, basically all those powers followed him. They, both, how do I, like I just mentioned, they've mended the Constitution. Basically, they both now rule by decree. They both now have the power, because in 2017, Erdogan literally wrote his own constitution. And they can both intervene in the judiciary, dissolve parliament. The one thing that was really cool I noticed between them, they both built their own palaces. Putin has his down there a little north of Sochi on the Black Sea. And then Erdogan has built one for himself, I guess because the palace was damaged in the coup attempt. But we all know who it really belongs to. They built these because they plan on staying there for a long time and just using a state asset as their personal home. Putin is the infamous warden of, journalism, pretty much concentration camps. And Erdogan actually broke the world record for arresting journalists. Putin invaded Ukraine and Georgia to save people inside of Russia, or mainly with Ukraine he did that. He was saving people in Russia from the Nazis spilling over and bringing homosexuality to Russia, whatever. He has, the story changes depending on what crowd he's in front of. And then, he'll say he was protecting Russians in Ukraine. Then he was reuniting those parts. And then he was also saying that, they just, out of nowhere decided they wanted to leave. As soon as they voted to start heading for the EU, these people just, held a referendum overnight and, wanted me to invade and annex. And then Erdogan, he invaded Syria's Idlib region, and, he was out there purging terrorists. They did the peace deal and all that, and I think basically Trump was just going to let Erdogan be the de facto ruler over that province. But once I saw Assad and Putin, just bombing that area and shelling that area, I knew that Erdogan and Putin had made a deal to, I'm not sure, I bet half went back to the Assad government and Erdogan gets to probably rule over half. I don't know, that's certainly something they would only talk about behind closed doors. They both can't leave office. They both have committed such horrible crimes. They've jailed so many people. When Erdogan rewrote the Constitution in 2017, he jailed, I think it was 10,000 or 15,000 people, and most of them were teachers, judges, lawyers, mayors, all types of legislative politicians, academics, journalists, and a lot of military members. So it was undeniably a political purge. It was pretty much he had a enemy list and he just went after them. A lot of them are still sitting in prison today without charges. It's been years. But, Putin, same thing. I don't think Erdogan has necessarily killed very many people. He might have by instruction, but I know Putin has had a lot of people killed. It's not like it's just like dozens. It's certainly in the hundreds that he's had. And that's like by direct or indirect FSB operations, dirty business tactics, overseas assassinations. He knows, when the election that just happened in 2018, he purged like 6 people out of his cabinet that were former FSB people because he was paranoid. And he has to hold on to power, him and Erdogan both, because when they leave, it doesn't matter who gets into office. The enemies are going to weasel their way in and basically call for justice. And they're going to start exposing a lot of stuff once the fear factor of these two totalitarian leaders is gone. Once they no longer have power. Their money and power relies in their ability to do whatever they want to anybody. Both these men now, under their own new rules that they've written, basically authored themselves, and they've given themselves power, they can pick up a phone call any time of the day and have anybody arrested for any reason at any time. They don't have to give them charges. They will tell the judge what to sentence them to. And I'm sure there's some RT bots who are going to say, oh, the U.S. can do that too. They can only do that under the National Defense Authorization Act. And you have to get a warrant from a judge to do that. Trump cannot just pick up the phone, I live in Jacksonville, Florida, and just call Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and say, hey, go arrest Chandler, charge him with this, and give him 6 years in prison. That would not work here. But, they're routine political purges. They both seek to become a higher status as a power. Russia wants to become a global power, to either bilaterally stand up with the United States or at least maybe even beat us, And then Erdogan wants to become a completely independent power in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, that whole bridge to Asia and the Middle East from Europe. And they both have to make a choice. Because even though they both have had a very similar career, 2023, Erdogan's 4th term is up and Putin's 4th term is up. And that's when they're the same time that they're both going to have to decide if they're just going to scrap the Constitution and just declare themselves president for life like Xi Jinping did. I predict that Duterte, the way he's going to end up getting himself in the same situation. He's going to create too many enemies. He's going to have to stay in power, and he's going to end up being there for as long as he can. But, yeah, 2023, 2024, this was a play done by Erdogan intentionally to get kicked out of NATO. He has... He was trying to latch on to NATO and Western partnerships for as long as he can, just to keep the economy good, but I guess he started running out of time. And anyone who becomes a dictator or wants to become more of an authoritarian or if they want to transition from authoritarian to totalitarian, they always end up siding with Putin. They start having meetings with him, all that stuff, so... This is nothing to be surprised about.